Hello, and a very warm welcome to a very special conversation today at the Healthy Brain Congress. Today, we're going to talk about how we can naturally strengthen our brains and activate our life energy so that we can think more clearly, feel better, and above all, stay healthier. And that's something we all want, isn't it? And today we're talking about something truly fascinating. There are tiny building blocks in our bodies called microtubules, and they are like tiny rails in the brain. They control important processes and are even connected to structures that are like crystals. And modern research shows that when we set these areas into vibration using new holistic methods, our bodies begin to self-regulate and heal. Frequencies, oscillations, and vibrations all play a part in this, a very, very important role. And the interplay between the brain and especially these frequencies influences how well we think, how fit our cells are, and how we feel. And it can even affect our lifespan. And I am very pleased that today we have a true expert with us. Ines Schwartz has gained more than 20 years of international experience in the health sector and in science. Ines combines scientific precision with spiritual depth and will explain to us today how frequency medicine and the power of our brain are connected. She will show us how we can practically use this knowledge for more energy and well-being in our daily lives. First of all, let me welcome you, dear Ines. Hello, it's great to have you here. It's wonderful that you're here today. So I just gave you a nice introduction, and I think we're really in for something great today. We're going to learn something from you that has never been heard before.
Yes, never in this form before.
I'm really curious because it's about the high frequency range, what that actually is, and especially what it does to our minds. And yes, I'm really looking forward to it.
And the smallest parts in our bodies. Yes, today we want to talk about individual brain optimization because every brain is different. It's about individuality. And there is no one fix for all, nothing that works for everyone. That means it also has something to do with vital longevity. And there are a lot of new possibilities in this area, and these are also connected to crystals. And not just any crystals, but very special high-performance crystals. So we already know crystals, semi-precious stones, and so on. They already have wonderful structures, but they don't have this high vibrational spectrum. And there are indeed some very special high-performance crystals. We've already shown this one in the presentation. You can see it here all the way on the left. This is the gallium arsenide crystal, which is integrated into our EIBA Mac. And it harmonizes, or rather presents, a well-balanced vibrational spectrum. But we'll get to that later. First, I'd like to go through something with you. What kind of problems do people actually have? There were a lot of online announcements and questions about what people are complaining about and why are people not doing well mentally, not well. And what is the reason for that? What are they wishing for? What should be better? And these are actually really simple things, but you have to wonder, why aren't any of them working?
Exactly. And the main ability these days is to maintain focus. Because we're being bombarded with all kinds of information. And yes, again, that I refocus again, that's of course also something that many people wish for.
Yes, that's strength, but also, for example, at night. For example, I would also like to have lucid dreams. That means being able to influence my dreams and also deeply relax while doing so. So if I want to be able to switch into a state of relaxation.
I once had a teacher who said to me, bulimic dreaming. It's just like this. You go to bed, dream about something, and you're not satisfied. But that's what many people want. They want to dream deliberately, of course.
Exactly. And to improve creativity definitely in our daily lives, in our work.
Achieving centering and a profound sense of calmness are basically just as fundamentally important as maintaining sharp focus and effectively reducing any nervous energy that might arise.
Yes, because a lot of people are extremely nervous and can't control themselves. But that also has to do with the fact that sleep isn't deep and restful.
The effects of reduced sleep on the brain are of course severe, and many people sleep poorly.
So for anyone who recognizes themselves in these areas, sexual performance is also related to this. Very few people know that. It has to do with brain activity primarily.
And of course, everyone wants improved mental abilities. More
Better learning, faster as well, children in school, adults being able to grasp things more quickly and remember them better. And short-term memory is also very important as it plays a major role in this.
Exactly. Yes, short-term improvement of memory and increased mental and physical energy.
And yes, being able to consciously let go of negative behavior patterns so that I can enter a relaxed, alert state where I don't immediately freak out if something doesn't go my way or something happens on the street. That means I also need improved attention and concentration so that I have a different perception, a holistic perception. And these are all things that really surprised me, Ingo. People wish for these things and you just think it's strange, that should actually be normal.
It should be normal. I think it used to be normal back in the day. Part of it, not everything.
Yes, so the question is then, and what does that have to do with? And if you look at the big picture, it really has a lot to do with individual brain chemistry, with the microstructures in the brain, but also with toxin exposure. Many neurotoxins. Where do they come from? Why are they in the brain? We'll get into that. There are also a lot of frequency influences that are not at all beneficial to our brain. I think many people who attend your Congress already know that. And of course, besides one's own principles in life, the ways of thinking, it's also, of course, how do I nourish myself? Your audience knows that very well too. The physical energy balance also plays a very important role in brain metabolism in general. So these are things that are known, but the question is, and that's exactly where we are today, how can we influence that? And how can I, as an independent person at home, influence it so that this process returns to optimal regulation, which is, of course, different for every individual. And that's what we'll be addressing. And I also want to use this presentation to explain again how the body works. And only if we truly understand how certain connections exist in our body regarding the blood, the lymph, the cells, how they influence each other, and how I can then intervene so that everything comes back into balance. That's what we're going to focus on today. Yes, as you've nicely laid out here, there are some truly remarkable international research studies, and these are also interdisciplinary in nature. Neurophysics, quantum biology, complexity theory, and they actually started with neurodegenerative diseases because many people, there are more and more people who are experiencing these mental imbalances. And so I picked out a few pioneers in this field, and I'll explain in a moment why I chose them. Because they discovered something truly special and quite remarkable. They all meticulously studied the intricate microtubules in great depth and with considerable detail.
I'm sure many viewers have never even heard of them.
Microtubules? The term itself. And that's actually a shame because a lot of people already know about mitochondria. Those are also important components of the cell. There's a lot of talk about them. But when it comes to something even smaller, just like with atoms, where at first it was just the atom itself, and then there were electrons, positrons, and neutrons, and eventually we got to the quantum perspective, to quanta and quarks. So we've always delved into smaller and smaller structures, and that's how today we also delve into these deep structures in the brain, because these microtubules are present in every brain cell. In fact, 2,000 microtubules in every brain cell, And with that, of course, I have a huge reservoir of possibilities. And the question is, what functions do they have? What do they do? How can I influence them? And that's exactly what these researchers asked themselves. And so they also, so to speak, these microtubules are like the capillary system of the cell. Just as we have veins and arteries in the body, we also have the finest systems within the cell. And these microtubules are precisely these fine capillary systems inside the cell. And I'll go into more detail about that. It's absolutely fascinating and exciting when you grasp the significance and effectiveness of these microtubules. There's still a lot of research being done. Much is still unknown in this area. But what I found interesting was the Nobel Prize winner in physics in 2020. Some people might still remember him. Roger Penrose. He particularly fascinated me. Even back in 1994, there was the film. What the bleep do we know? Bleep, that was a film that triggered something in a lot of people, just like the Matrix movies did back then. It's definitely a must-see. And he is 94 years young today. So
he's still alive?
Yes, he's still alive and he's full of vitality. Because he has his microtubules under control and he knows how it works. And that's exactly what we're talking about today. And he's also done some really interesting research. How does a physicist, one really has to ask, how does a physicist end up dealing with the biochemistry of the brain? He actually worked on black holes. And black holes, we have them too, and I'm being deliberately provocative here. We have them in our own bodies as well. And I'll reveal this secret a bit later. Then, of course, he also worked together with Stuart Hameroff. So the first one is British, the second is American. He also developed this quantum consciousness model. So these are all people you can look up. Really fascinating. In other words, he believes that we can constantly upgrade our brains. If the microtubules are, so to speak, in a he calls it an alignment, and are optimally vibrating, then we gain access to entirely new fields of consciousness. I'll go into the details of that later as well. Then there's Amit Goswami, who may also be familiar to many. He developed the integrated information theory. This is also about the idea that everything is connected to everything else. And we are also connected through our collective consciousness. We are interconnected and influence each other. And this can be supported in a positive way. But of course, it can also be downgraded, so to speak, or negatively influenced. Then I found this very nice. There is also a Rolf Robosa. He stood out to me as a German because he also dealt with brain chemistry. So he also worked for many years at the Max Planck Institute, but then became self-employed as a journalist. And he reports on these latest research findings. And I also found it very interesting, the different perspectives he does. So this interdisciplinary collaboration of various researchers on the topic, it's not just pure biochemistry, it's also about physics. And this vibrational medicine, this energy medicine, which is becoming more and more prominent. And then there's a very interesting Indian researcher, Anirban Opadhyay. He has also conducted interesting research on the smallest parts in the brain, namely the microtubules, which were very important to him. He also wrote a book, Nanobrain, which is also available. And there he also put forward certain hypotheses regarding timelines or the influence of time or the influence on the perception of time. So very interesting topics. That's just as a preface. So, when we now talk about these more specific topics, we are moving in this truly very, very advanced research environment where not everything is set in stone yet, where there is still a lot that is hypothetical, but the things that are already established. The ones that have already been researched can also be found in some truly scientific publications. I'd like to introduce these to you in a bit more detail now because it's really about understanding our bodies better. So it's about the healthy microtubules in brain cells. How do they work, and how can we actually activate them? So it's known, it's clear that information processing in the brain also happens beyond the classic neurons. According to these researchers, the microtubules are quantum computers, quantum computing structures. They're quantum computers. These tiny parts are quantum computers, yes. And you can imagine there has to be some energy present for them to function. Where do they get their energy from? They actually generate it themselves. That brings us to the topic of free energy. Fascinating. And then there's also the topic of non-local consciousness potentials. That means we have information processing on the quantum level through entanglement. I think many people are already familiar with that. It's an extension of the existing field theory. And you might also know about savants. These are people who have truly extraordinary abilities. For example, people who can perform mathematical calculations with dozens of decimal places, and they don't actually calculate it, they just retrieve the answer fully formed. That's what's so interesting about it. They can even outperform computers. So there are, in terms of speed, there's a person named Daniel Tammet. You can look him up. It's absolutely fascinating. He's what you would definitely call an acquired or a learned savant. That truly means during his early childhood, he developed these extraordinary abilities. He had epileptic seizures. And after that, something in his brain chemistry changed. And since then, he's been a hyper genius. And he speaks. He can learn the most difficult languages in a week, perform mathematical calculations. So that's absolutely fascinating. And these are things that are also connected to the frequency dynamics of these microtubules. That means when these microtubules reorganize themselves in the body, regeneration also occurs in the brain. And this truly means that even previously impaired areas can be effectively reactivated and brought back to their full potential. And so in terms of longevity, this is of course also very interesting. And it should also be noted again, especially these topics, telepathy, foresight, intuitive knowledge, but also many have already heard of remote viewing. These are all topics that fall within the realm of these microtubules. Basically, it's about continuing to research and explore, because if these, let me call them structural proteins, and I'll get to further explanations in a moment, if they are really in the right swing, if they are active, then completely unexpected potentials open up for us. These are actually the potentials that we as humans may have once had, which were lost at some point, but which we can reawaken. We can shake them. I specifically say shake because we're talking here about oscillation, about vibration. And we're talking about a really, really fast oscillation, so fast that you actually can't even feel it. And just as a side note, even solar plasma, all those eruption waves coming from the sun, move within this high frequency range as well. That means these are healthy emissions of high frequency, which reach all the way into our blood plasma. And blood cells, they also contain these microtubules. And a lot is happening in our bodies because of that. So it's a complex, holistic approach when you deal with these microtubules. That's why it's so interesting. To understand this again as a summary, so there are these microtubules throughout our entire body. On average, there are about 2,000 of them in every cell of the body. And this has an effect on our existence and also on our brain activity. And brain activity is also very, very closely connected to the digestive system. And we've all felt those butterflies in our stomach before. Those are the microtubules. They carry this information from the brain because when you're delighted, when you're happy, this information is immediately transmitted to the digestive system and you experience this wonderful feeling of happiness. So these feelings of happiness are actually biophysical aspects. I don't want to limit it too much, but primarily they are biophysical in nature. Movements in the body of these microtubules. And there is also a connection between microtubule activity and the crystalline structures in the body. And crystals, Ingo, we're talking about geometric shapes, perfect geometric forms. And they bring, you can see it very clearly here in the middle. Look, these are, so to speak, the proteins that attach themselves to these microtubules. That's the central strand. Exactly. The microtubules are in the middle, and it's like a ring antenna. It moves, so to speak, like a dynamo. It's in constant vibration. The question is it vibrating in disharmony or in harmony with the system? And as a result, these vibration patterns naturally arise. This is also known from water, where there are harmonic and disharmonic vibration patterns, which you can also observe in water. And you can see this here as well in the aqueous environment, then in the blood plasma and in the proteins that attach themselves there. And the proteins play a very, very important role in this. And at the top right, I've also shown it again, this crystalline structure. So these are crystalline building blocks that essentially form these tubes, these microtubule tubes. And it's also referred to as a cavity. Resonators. That means they come into contact with the environment. Into resonance, exactly. And that's why the question is, what do I resonate with? Which vibration or so, which crucial information actually reaches these intricate microtubules? And quite obviously, when these significant disharmonies are truly present within the brain and also throughout the entire body, then there's something wrong with the information transmission there. And I'll get into that in just a moment as well. Namely, what are possible causes? But now I wanted to ask again about the butterflies in your stomach. So it's the microtubules that are vibrating. And if the other person, because I have butterflies in my stomach, has the same frequency as I do, then they vibrate at exactly the same frequency. And that's why we get butterflies in our stomachs. Did you like it? Explained, yes, you put it very nicely. So the microtubules, the oscillating circuit isn't limited to just the physical level of the body, but it goes far beyond that. It actually builds your entire aura field. And why has no one ever talked about this before? Of course, people do talk about it, but I would say maybe it's just not the most attractive field of science. Many things are simply hard to measure as well. These are long-term observations when changes then occur in the body. But nowadays, of course, you can already see a lot through blood. Under the microscope, you can already see changes. You can see that, yes. When high frequency interacts with the blood, for example. And I'll explain again later why certain blockages are there, why there are possibilities, and these are also hypotheses, but why don't these microtubules really get into their groove? What are the causes for that? But I want to come back to this again. So you all know the dynamo on a bicycle and so on. Through this angular momentum, that's the self-generated energy of these microtubules. They are constantly spinning and in different directions. In doing so, they essentially generate an electromagnetic field within the body. And the body, our body, is after all an electromagnetic communication system. Exactly, that's one way to put it. And these microtubules, of course, also analyze their environment. That means how is the blood, how is the lymph, and accordingly, when they are in an active state, improvement information is passed along. So these are very, very tube systems in the body that are set up to promote healing. You really have to ask yourself, why do we have them? We don't have as many microtubules as we do these tube systems. There's a reason for that, because they regulate life energy and I would say the body's adaptation to environmental conditions. Because I also resonate with it in order to adapt myself. So this is highly fascinating. And the microtubules react accordingly. They actually produce light themselves. They emit light impulses. That means we ourselves are beings of light. They emit biophotons, so through their intricate movement, through the subtle interplay of light, and through this dynamic movement of electrons, there are distinct bursts of radiant light, and consequently, they visibly pulsate. You truly have to imagine it like this. These microscopic microtubules genuinely and continuously pulsate. And they also respond to sounds. So it's also very interesting that, for example, everyone who makes vocal sounds, hums, sings, this also has a very positive effect on the alignment, the ability to resonate, and the flexibility of the microtubules. And it's also known that people who sing a lot in choirs, they have less dementia. They can remember long texts very well because the body is constantly in a good state of vibration. Although that's a lower level of vibration, and the body doesn't just have high frequencies, but also low frequencies. It starts at 4 or 5 hertz and goes up to millions or billions of vibrations. We can't even fully comprehend all of it yet. But especially here in the brain, high frequencies are particularly welcome because, as the saying goes, that's when the lid comes off.
Comes off. Yes.
And also, it's important to emphasize again here, let me point this out once more, this geometric language of forms is extremely important because it also carries information. So these are ordered structures, and they are also information carriers. They also pass this information on to the blood plasma. Yes, then let's take a look. Wait just a moment, please. I'd like to briefly and comprehensively say something quite important about this fascinating microtubule swing. So in these, let's say, very, very intricate and complex, in advanced scientific circles, they actually talk about the initialization of the microtubule swing. So the microtubules have to dance in the body. This sets off a domino effect. A cascade is triggered. That means, in other words, disharmonic frequency elements are essentially overwritten, quite simply. And once that cascade gets going, then it affects the entire body. And that's what's interesting. That means through the microtubules, I have access to the entire body system, not just individual areas. And I go really deep into the cell. After all, microtubules are present in every cell. And what, according to these scientists, is actually disease? Well, it's simply incompatible. Frequency information. That's also one way to look at things. And so then that means why do these disturbances exist? To understand that, maybe we need to look again at how our body actually works. And okay, the brain now has these microtubules, but obviously when you're sick and when you have brain problems, as we mentioned at the beginning, when you just can't get into the swing of things, something's off, you're not in tune with an individually optimal frequency. That means even this command center, the gut-brain axis, doesn't work for cell communication. Or, for example, the production of neurotransmitters like serotonin and so on is controlled in the brain. The impulses are regulated in the brain, but these substances are also produced in the body, and that's exactly what's being disrupted. So, and why isn't this working so well? Because in the blood, there are also various infections. Recently, there have also been by now a lot of solid, good pieces of information about this. Parasites and pathogenic microorganisms, they play a very significant role in the blood. And if something in the body isn't right, because they have some pretty massive tricks, I would say, to deceive the body. And if you consider, we have leukocytes, the white blood cells, and that's basically the police force of the body. And if they don't function properly.
What if they don't even know that these things might be present?
Yes, if they're blind or can't get to the problems. And that's often the case, that many people don't know why their immune system, meaning the polymorphonuclear cells, the white blood cells, the leukocytes, why aren't they working? And that's exactly what's so fascinating, because you can't explain this biochemically, only biophysically. We've seen this ourselves. I've seen it under the microscope. So you see a pathogenic organism and you see the leukocytes in the blood, live blood analysis.
And nothing happens.
And why does nothing happen? You don't understand it, even though the person is eating optimally and doing many things right. And that's what's so fascinating, what many of these organisms are capable of. They attach themselves to the T cells, that is, to the immune cells, piggyback on them, and surround themselves with the same frequency as these immune cells. The immune cells are negatively charged. And as a result, these, let's say, microorganisms and pathogenic germs, etc., also have the ability to mimic this negative charge. They go into stealth mode, and negative repels negative. The immune system can't get to them. And this stealth mode via the lymphatic system, for example, lipedema and many lymphatic congestions, really have something to do with the fact that many pathogens hide there and are in stealth mode. And these are things you really have to take a closer look at that. So, for example, are they able to do that? And for example, these interleukins, but we're really getting into the details here, but they can actually cause the interleukins to stop triggering macrophage production. That means they're actually supposed to produce these cells, these phagocytes, that basically gobble up all these germs. But they trick them and manipulate them in a very clever way so that the interleukins no longer trigger macrophage production. And a lot of people deal with this because they have too few immune cells in their bodies. So that's also a problem. And it's important to know, again, on this topic, that leukocytes, meaning white blood cells, also generate electricity themselves. That's what they're there for, so that they can move quickly through the body, and so they can also read information from the microtubules, from the proteins. But if the microtubules are also surrounded by misfolded proteins, that means that even here, these blood cells and the proteins are not in their original crystalline structure. That means the entire blood plasma, the aqueous environment in the body, is not right. Then the fight, or let's say the overcoming of these disharmonies, simply doesn't work. It's like fighting windmills. And the red blood cells as well, they are of course important as oxygen carriers. If they clump together, if there's too much waste in the body, then nothing flows anymore. And when they stick together, this rouleau formation, as it's known from microscopy, you end up with a reduced surface area. That means you have less oxygen in the body. That means you have less oxygen in the brain, poorer circulation. What happens then? You end up with plaque in the brain. These are deposits, protein deposits, and these are simply issues. And that's when you end up with an energy deficiency. And the entire process associated with it stops working. And now I've talked a lot about problems, but now we need to offer a solution. Yes, so basically it has been found that with individually adjusted oscillating high frequencies, you can actually influence these things. So the special thing you can do, and this fascinates me, is that you can practically, as they say so nicely in English, strip off. So imagine a striptease now. You can practically strip these pathogenic organisms, so to speak. Remove their camouflage mask. That's what high frequency does. It neutralizes them again. That means they become visible again as a result. Exactly, the cloak of invisibility falls away and the immune system recognizes, here I have something to do. And so that the immune system actually acts when crystalline information, that is the ordered structures of crystals, affect the system. Then I also have this protein folding again, which attaches to these microtubules. And then, yes, this optimal swing comes back in, and the microtubules are once again the good analysts. They're the data analysts again and observe, something is happening here now. I need to take action here. I need to provide energy here. You can see that under the microscope. You can see a lot under the microscope. But you can see the movement of the blood cells, that you can see You can't see the microtubules. They're too small, but there's a really great image of them. We had that in the last presentation. It was taken with a super microscope in the USA. Maybe we could include it again. You can see these tubes, how the microtubules run along there. But basically, it's just important to emphasize again, we can use high frequency, that is natural high frequency, crystalline high frequency, which is not technically generated and which also does not emit a fixed frequency, but instead adapts individually to the current state of the body. And how can we do that? By working through the blood, by scanning the blood, the frequency of the blood, then we actually know very precisely what's going on, what frequency profile is present, and whether there are disharmonic or harmonic frequency profiles within this structure. And in this way, we can also restore a healthy brain structure. That is the microstructure in the brain. And this also stimulates all synaptic activity. So it also helps with the removal of waste products. And it really always fundamentally comes down to the absolute precision of the entire regeneration and organizational structure. We have here, this is a bit much information, but if you want to take a look at it later, Ingo, if you could briefly display the slide. There's quite a lot written there again, summarizing what I just said.
The slide is available for download below.
People can take a look at it. Yes, and the next one, please. Yes, and then since we've been talking about crystals, humans actually have many crystals in their bodies, all of which have a purpose. Among them are also the magnetite crystals in the brain. And interestingly, this was discovered about 20 or 25 years ago in the USA, but by now it's already quite well known. So people are already talking quite openly about the fact that these magnetite crystals have a huge storage capacity and are also essential for our brain functions. And interestingly, they have a rhombic shape. And then you naturally ask yourself, why rhombuses, why a rhombic shape? And of course, that also triggered something in me. And so I delved a bit deeper into it. What is this rhombic shape? Strictly speaking, you should say rhombohedron because it's a multidimensional shape. So it also holds secrets. And for those who are interested, we can also include the article again. We've said quite a bit about that. So what's interesting here again is that through this, the interaction of the microtubules with these crystals, which create principles of order, these synapses start functioning again. That means the firing and also the speed of data transmission. And the precision of data transmission and the ease in your head as well, because I don't have to constantly rack my brain thinking, oh, what was I about to do, and so on. No, it's effortless. Learning also becomes much easier, of course, when everything up there in your head, so to speak, let me put it this way, is resonating well and properly electrified. And that doesn't mean these magnetite crystals. So we're talking here about electromagnetic. So magnetite has a significant connection with magnets. In other words, they possess the unique ability to effectively transmit and reliably store information. Crystals are always able to store information. So there's quite a lot we can do, and that's why it's interesting to work on the head. And you can see when these synapses fire, then it's not just that information is being transmitted there. It actually goes through the microtubules and then throughout the entire body. As a result, the entire body chemistry, not just the brain chemistry, but also the body chemistry and even gastrointestinal issues, etc. All of that is interconnected and influenced by this. And
up there in the brain, you recorded all of that, right? The dots?
I think that's an original recording. I can't really say for sure right now because I've had it in my files for a very long time. I believe the dots were recorded using an electron microscope. There are billions, truly billions. No, the dots, those are the magnetite crystals. There are billions of them. I think that's an original recording, but I'm not 100% sure here. But here it's shown again. how this distribution works. And the question is, we have many resources in our body, but what do we do with them? What
do we do with them?
Do we use them? Do we know all of them? Now back to the topic of crystals. We have many crystals in our body. They have a physical structure. They are solid, but they are also liquid crystals. We also have liquid crystals in our blood plasma because these liquid crystals are protein components that organize themselves in a crystalline way. We also have crystalline structures in the water, in the body water, of course.
That is the fifth phase.
That's the expert. There we have...
We've already talked a lot about that.
Exactly. So if the water functions in a plasmatic way, then of course we already have a huge advantage because the whole thing is active. Let's put it this way. Plasmatic water is the primordial soup in which everything can continue to resonate. The question is, what kind of information gets added to it? And that's just it. Everyone needs something different. I can't have a one-size-fits-all solution where everyone gets a certain frequency and it just works. So always using the same frequency isn't correct either. It really should change. As you can see, we also have ethereal crystal formations up here. The energy field of our body actually extends much, much further. And in these areas, we also have crystalline structures. And that's how these microtubules are formed, which also emit scalar waves. And as I said, as Mr. Penrose says, black holes, for example, are also like that. In other words, black holes can not only absorb information, but they can also, these microtubules, thanks to their dipole capability, emit information again. And that's particularly fascinating when you look at these psychic abilities that can arise as a result and can develop if things up there are in balance again. And you mentioned we also have this topic of water here. So water is, of course, as you already said, always very closely connected with crystals. And that's so beautiful. When we understand how these water crystals, which also operate in our bodies, arrange themselves according to principles of order.
They look beautiful.
Yes, I really like that too. And there's also a wonderful researcher who photographed snow crystals. We've talked about him before. And that's also fascinating. So there really are some extraordinary researchers. They're not always at the top institutions, but these are people who are interested in the exceptional. And maybe that's not always commercially relevant, but they prove through their own abilities that it somehow makes sense. Most of them are very old and mentally top fit. Now back to the topic of crystals. Now, of course, people are wondering, you're talking about crystals here. So what exactly is that? Well, I personally use the EIBA Mac crystal.
One right at the bottom on the left, right?
Yes, that's the one drawn there. Did you
put so many crystals there now? Draw them?
Yes, that's an excellent and insightful question because there's a fundamental nesting principle deeply involved in this process. So right here, you can clearly see I have the remarkable EIBA Mac crystal positioned here, and I am going to proceed to activate it now as well, initiating its function. It
beeped.
Yes, and then you can see it very nicely here. The one that's inside is this gallium arsenide crystal, which is also well known because due to its high storage capacity, it's used for communication, even in space. And there are very few sites in the world where it's found. And interestingly, because the crystal exhibits some very strange quantum phenomena that to this day still can't be fully deciphered. And that's precisely why it's often pointed out that this particular crystal actually contains certain unique meteoritic influences or even specific meteoritic elements, which then subsequently combined with the existing local crystals found deep within the Earth's ancient crust. And there, over millions of years, they matured and essentially stored the DNA of our planet. That means the entire spectrum, the life-supporting spectrum of our planet, and that is firmly stored there. It can't be erased or manipulated. It's stable, and that's what's so interesting about it. So it's a kind of living crystal library. And I'm reminded again of that beautiful saying, you've probably heard it too, from Tesla, who said, when people eventually understand that crystals are living beings, then evolution will have taken a big step forward. And that's the case here. So what's interesting about these crystals is, you can also see it here on the left, they have these different kind of interlocking structures of the crystals. So it's not just one singular form, but rather various distinct forms that profoundly influence each other, creating a complex and interconnected system. There are actual patterns of order interference. And all the way to the right, there's also an image from the University of Regensburg, where they actually measured how these high-frequency crystals oscillate. That means, as I mentioned before, they jump, let me repeat, the EIBA Mac crystal jumps 65 to 70 billion times per second. It's almost unimaginable. And that's how they create this frequency profile that corresponds to our body, to life here on this planet. And as we said earlier, when there is movement, light is also emitted. And light also carries information. And because of this, the crystal has its own information spectrum. And due to this speed, it is also, this is a hypothesis, capable of connecting with dimensions or retrieving information that is not necessarily at home in the lower Schumann frequency range, but go far, far beyond that. So that's really an interesting phenomenon. So what does it mean when this crystal is active? At the very bottom left, the green part, that's a microtubule seen under an electron microscope. And you can see when the microtubule is really working perfectly, then it acts as this antenna, and in the center, that's the tube itself. And that's exactly what Mr. Penrose says, this black hole that is able to retrieve information. So we suspect that the crystal also continues to evolve. Cosmically, there may be a lot going on, and a lot is also happening in the solar plasma. The question is, how receptive are we to resonance, to that? And you can clearly and distinctly see, as vividly shown in the image at the top left, precisely how this oscillation torus forms. And this also has an effect on the blood profile. That is, the red blood cells and also the white blood cells return to their harmonious form. And also this radiance and this function are once again maintained for which they exist. And what's also highly interesting is that because these microtubules vibrate at such a high frequency, they also have a communication frequency with our DNA. That means the DNA and the microtubules get along excellently. They can communicate with each other when they are in harmony with each other. And as a result, the chromosome strands can also be read. That means if things like traumas or shocks or whatever have been imprinted somewhere, then through this kind of reset, it's possible for these things to be recalibrated anew. So these are all things that lead to the creation of harmonious areas. This is exactly what crystal research is about. It is known that these things can happen with high-frequency crystals. But there is still a huge, vast spectrum of research to be done. They are used in some clinics worldwide. Are people working with these crystals? Yes, and specifically in the very, I wouldn't call them the normal med beds, but rather these are already, they are not somehow connected to the cloud, nor do they try to manipulate anything. There are other possibilities for that. We are cosmic beings, and the body itself knows. Every body has its own set of instruments. And I don't need to interfere from the outside. All I need to do is give the body back the energy, the strength, and the information it needs so it can get itself going again. That's really what it's all about. But does this exist in Germany? No, in Germany, this type of med beds that I'm talking about does not exist. But I do think that there will certainly be other things coming soon. But personally, I haven't yet been convinced by their principles of operation. Yes, because I don't want to be told what to do and be scanned down to the last detail. The information that the crystal scans, that stays between the crystal and me, and it doesn't go into any cloud. And it's also not connected to the internet, only to a base station that doesn't operate via the internet. Yes, if you just take a look at it in a straightforward way to understand how these truly fascinating crystals work, if you just look at the image above, you can see that's a disharmonious frequency profile. The person has some kind of problems. Maybe they have some genetic predispositions, but perhaps they also have an overactive immune system. You can see that in the first spike upwards. And then there's also a dip downwards. That's when the immune system is too weak. So as we just said, the leukocytes, they're not functioning properly, and maybe this person constantly has hay fever or the cell communication is disrupted. Yes, that's actually quite common too. Also with diabetes or numb areas in the body. So something just isn't working right there. And interestingly, the crystal, which is the image in the middle, has, as I said, this harmonious, life-promoting frequency spectrum, which you can't really influence further, or even if you tried, it wouldn't allow it. When this comes together, so this, the natural crystal vibration or the profound crystal library of our entire planet, when that deeply resonates with the human body, the body is inherently intelligent enough to precisely take exactly the vital information it truly needs at that very moment. And interestingly, during this scanning process, this interaction is already happening. It's not necessarily linear, it actually happens simultaneously. And that's how you can see the individual frequency profile for this wave at this moment. So it's also time dependent because we are constantly changing our frequencies. And I have to say, especially with parasites, we know that parasites change their frequency several times a day. And if I always use the same fixed frequency on them, at some point, nothing happens anymore. It just stops working. At some point, they just laugh at that because the next generation already has a completely different frequency spectrum. After all, they've evolved cleverly on our planet over millions of years. And that's how they've prevailed, or the fungi. So that means I always have to be able to respond individually to the organism. And the body knows itself. It knows what information it needs to initiate certain biochemical and also biophysical processes in the body. So this is the current prevailing research opinion, which is indeed already very much established. It's really very innovative, I have to say. The image you now see.
Look, now it's the human being who has problems. That's where the frequency goes, but there might also be holes in it. The red areas are definitely holes. Yes, or
any minor irregularities such as defects. So not really, no, not at all. For this frequency spectrum. Those are disharmonic frequencies that don't fit in there.
Exactly. Normally it would be natural, but in this case it's not natural because something is there. Then we have the crystal, and it has its own natural individual vibrations. And it compensates, if I look at the image below now, it compensates for the missing vibrations above. It balances them out again. Exactly right. And basically smooths them out again.
So basically, to put it another way, the crystal actually doesn't do anything. It simply offers. It offers. It offers. And what the human body truly does with it, well, the body is incredibly smart. It inherently knows precisely what it's missing. And we have this self-healing effect in our body. And that's also a way to trust our body again and to accept it. Also to stimulate it, to make use of the intelligence it possesses. And through these microtubules, which don't sleep either, they're active too. But if, of course, they're constantly affected by, let me put it this way, these stresses, and also by, let's say, things like electrosmog and constant exposure to very or unhealthy diets, etc., then there are a lot of issues that just don't get sorted out. And just like with the old tape recorders, people know this from the old tape recorders. I didn't have to erase the old frequency of the song I didn't want to hear anymore, or that was bad. I just recorded over it with another one, exactly. And it's similar here. That means a reset. A new day, a new chance, as I like to say. That's the example
that you mentioned with the tape recorder. Because the information is there and now it's being recorded over with the new information.
And I don't have to keep digging around in the old stuff forever, rummaging through it. You just have to consider, well, you can
cut it out, maybe shorten it.
Yes, and I have to say, I do think it's great when psychologists work through things. People need that. But I think as a support, this harmonization, really this brain harmonization is very important, because with these microtubules, which I can influence both in the body and in the brain. And as I said, if we just take a quick look here, for example, you mentioned plasma water earlier. If I have good plasma water throughout my body, and I can achieve that with the crystal as well. With the water structuring program, I can create these zones in just 10 minutes. Whoosh, 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 it goes really, really fast. I don't have to mess around with it forever. That way, I've already fine-tuned my body in just 10 minutes early in the morning. It works that quickly? Yes, it works very quickly because you don't have to spend a long time on it. Or you can see on the right, there are also pictures at the bottom for concentration difficulties. So those are points in the brain where you hold the crystal, just hold it there. And we also have, if I can just quickly show this again for everyone, we have the protective cap right here as well, which is quite important. That would be nice if you could, yes, exactly. So we also have this here. I'll try to keep it brief here. Then we have this kind of cap here where we've also worked in, where do I insert the crystals? So there are 5 spots that are effective everywhere. Also up here, the crown chakra, that's also very important. And I can also use a relatively short, comfortable headband. I can put it gently around my head and use it on these specific spots and areas as well. I can work with it on the body. And you really notice that you quickly come back to your center. Could you please show us the second slide again?
The second one?
Yes, that one. Yes, great. So here you can see it nicely again, because the glands, this is also a very, very important topic. The glands, of course, influence the entire brain metabolism. And they are kind of the neglected ones, really, because they're hard to reach. But we can use high frequency, which is that sets these microtubules into vibration. The high frequency does. It doesn't go deep, though, just a few millimeters. But through this contact with the microtubules, they all are set into vibration. And then practically the entire brain structure is rebuilt from scratch. And if you do that for 10, 20, 25 minutes a day.
I should mention, you don't have to walk around with it all day. No, it's just 10 or 20 minutes.
Yes, and that optimizes intelligence. So information processing works much better. When I am preparing my lectures and truly need some inspiration, I always have my trusty crystal right here with me. I also have one that I can wear around my neck. You can actually tuck it inside, but you can also wear it on your body. You can also wear it on the outside if you want to harmonize your environment. Yes, so also for many people who have certain fears and phobias, these are all certain kinds of disharmonies. And when the brain is healthy, has plenty of oxygen, and is free from deposits, then the whole body is in a completely different state. And it's also about making sure the blood has enough oxygen, and right down to the finest capillaries. And it's known that when the blood, when it is electromagnetically activated, then there is also enough oxygen in the body. And oxygen, as we know, Warburg, nothing bad can happen when the body is flooded with oxygen. And it's also known that cells don't age if the environment is right. There was that famous chicken experiment. It went on for over 30 years with the chicken cells, where, well, it happened. I think I've already mentioned it in a lecture before with chicken cells, with cells from chickens.
But perhaps we'll come back to that again at some point in the future.
I always think that's already well known. But these are the kinds of things that even exceptional scientists, including Nobel Prize winners, have really thought about. And they've said, yes, the cell is actually immortal. I just have to give it the right means and opportunities to keep regenerating itself. And we can do that nowadays. And I think these crystals are not without reason either. Also, it serves as a crucial bridge for our contemporary time, which is profoundly marked by very, very massive and complex challenges. And it is often not always easy, even for perfectly healthy individuals, to consistently maintain a proper sense of balance in their daily lives, to effectively stay truly focused on their goals, and to genuinely achieve truly restorative and good quality sleep. Precisely. To effectively tackle this truly necessary and crucial development of our brain's cognitive capacity, we must not stand still either. There is a great deal waiting for us, which is truly very interesting and also significantly expands our current possibilities of perception and understanding. And then life becomes interesting and exciting again. If we take another look at this point here, as I've shown here again, the alpha point is also very interesting. These are just a few points that can really bring the brain back into a luminous phase. As I said, just a few minutes. And this neurotransmitter production also happens quite quickly. And you can support this process. And we all need this serotonin. We need to be in a good mood because so much is coming at us from the outside. And somehow you become more stable on the inside. I can say that from my own experience because, of course, I use this myself too. And the graphic that a good friend of ours made for this, I thought it was really beautiful. With
all the examples.
Yes, with the examples. So you also become more loving because you are centered within yourself. And being protected is not without reason, because you also have to understand that these microtubules, when they are in the right resonance circuit, then this effect extends far beyond the body. So you have your own cocoon and it can't be penetrated so easily. And when I am vibrating at a very high frequency, then I also don't let myself be thrown off my level so easily. Then I also have a certain compactness. And yes, basically what's also very interesting is, of course, we scan. Well, that can be demonstrated again. So we scan the pulse point. Yes, you can show and do that, yes, with the point. Here, this is basically the before. It is briefly activated. That means the crystal is activated on the platform, placed on it, laid on top, exactly the other way around like this. And then you illuminate it, and then the program is basically selected. Which program would you like? There are 7 of them, programs. You can also look it up on the internet to get more information. The information is available there too. And yes, it's actually simple. Touchscreen.
So I tried it myself earlier. It's really very simple. You immediately see what you need to do next, and then you press start, and then it begins.
The entire user manual is also included, but it's stored in the device. You don't have to read through long booklets, but basically the special thing is this individual condition measurement that we have there. That's unique. That means it's not just happening on a technical level like, oh, I'm just measuring a few frequencies. Because the crystal has this incredibly large storage spectrum within this frequency range, which really covers all areas of our body. We don't even know how far it actually goes. Maybe even into areas that we can't yet make visible or explain in any way. But in this way, a certain, information is made available to the body. It's like saying, here, there, this is the right spot. That's where you need to focus your attention. So the body gets another little push, so to speak. Here's the energy and the information. That's where you need to look. So the blindness, for example, of the leukocytes and other areas is, so to speak, eliminated. But
what I find interesting is this retransmission.
yes, so of course you can retransmit it back onto the body, or you can also transfer it onto globules, onto neutral globules. And what's also very interesting is the gold frequency, which is also, well, I also find colloidal gold very nice, but the gold frequency is something completely different again. I can use that as well. I can scan the gold and, of course, directly transfer the gold frequency to my brain. So I can work on the body, but I can also transfer the gold frequency onto other substances.
What is the exact gold frequency?
Basically, if I carefully scan the pure precious gold here right now, I practically take this pure unadulterated gold and then I meticulously place it directly onto the emitter. I can effectively scan almost anything imaginable, whether it's various types of metals, essential dietary supplements, or truly whatever I desire to analyze. And even with very expensive, valuable things, I can then precisely apply them directly to the body for a comprehensive assessment, or transfer them to other media, or preserve them for myself. So this storage and transmission of complex substances, that's really a good thing. But as I said, it's always interesting. It's this individual reflection with the scan and transfer program. Yes, so that would basically be, we are almost at the very end of our discussion now, I believe. So basically what I want to show again is that when a person is centered, meaning in harmony with themselves, then they act in an inspired way and naturally harmonize their environment as well. And here in the center, we see this blue person where the DNA is intact, the reading of the DNA strands. We don't just have the physical strands, we also have etheric strands. That's where our original code is stored, and when these microtubules start acting again and function as allies and communication transmitters between these DNA strands, then errors or certain problems can also be resolved. And you also build a beautiful field around yourself. And through this field, you can, of course, also be positive, influence your environment. And down here, someone has also made a nice video. How, for example, what sensations the person has. That this is another very famous artist from the USA, but she just sent that to me quickly. And she says, this is how I see it when the crystal has this kind of radiance and affects me. And you can also see, if you look to the right under the electron microscope, the images show that there really is a harmonious radiation of the electrons. That's really, really beautiful. So it's a harmonization. And that's what I hope for the world, for people. And we can make a small contribution here. And maybe if we cover some more things in the seminar soon,
we will still have a significant
seminar. We will go much deeper into this and definitely show all the possibilities and how sensational it is. Just the last thing with the globules alone. I found that super fascinating. You can also scan plants after all. Living plants, you don't even have to pick them. You can scan them and transfer that to your water. For example, with dandelion. You
don't eat dandelion.
Not eat dandelion every day like I used to do. I just find this topic absolutely fascinating. Yes, that was your contribution. Ines was truly sensational, and above all, yes, I also learned a lot. And for the first time, I was able to take a look at the EIBA Mac myself. And it really is a great device, and I even got to try it out. Yes, it has already shown its effect. And I think in your case, it definitely works very strongly if you can give such presentations here. You really need a lot of concentration and stamina for that. And yes, you developed this device here, which I think is absolutely great.
Together with our engineers, yes.
With your engineers, exactly.
Because I wanted it for myself too, needed it because I knew what the crystals could do. And of course, I really wanted to use it as optimally as possible for us so that we can truly stay fit and healthy as well, stay mentally fit.
Yes, if you're just as excited as I am now, then let us know. Let us know in the comments below this video. Any questions that come up, we can answer them there perfectly. What's really important to me is that this knowledge and these possibilities are made accessible to us, or to all of us, because they open up countless opportunities for us, both for your health and your consciousness. And I was really able to test everything here live all day long. That's why Ines Schwartz was here with me today. I brought these devices with me and it was truly fantastic. So I was really able to test everything live. And it's amazing what kinds of changes are possible when you use the right frequencies, high performance crystals, and the latest methods. And this experience really showed me just how much potential there is in all of this. So more vitality, better sleep, greater concentration, and a stronger sense of your body. These are definitely achievable for all of us. If you want to experience this for yourself, then take advantage of the opportunity during the Congress. And really only during the Congress, you'll get a €100 discount on the device or on the Kristaller. You can find the promo code below this video or somewhere at the bottom of the Congress page. It's definitely listed down there. Take advantage of this opportunity while the discount still applies. So thank you very much for being here today. It really means a lot to me, and an even bigger thank you to Ines Schwartz for the inspiring insights and the great conversation. She has now headed back home. I'm just going to quickly wrap things up here because it really was a wonderful day with the crystals, with Ines Schwartz, and yes, her husband will also be joining us. We're also planning to hold a really great seminar on this topic. And if any questions come up, feel free to write them in the comments below. We're here to help you and above all, to answer your questions. With that in mind, stay curious, open and vigilant. There is still so much to discover, and I am already looking forward to the next conversation with Name, Ines Schwartz. Until then, all the best, good health, and see you in the next interview here at the Healthy Brain Congress.